Good morning, everybody. I'm supposed to be Jim Schulman. I think I'm Larry Woods. Jim's had a family issue that slowed him down. I think he'll be joining us shortly, I hope. But we'll do without him if we have to. Our guest this morning, that many of you or most of you know, is Mattia Powell. Good morning, Miss Powell. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very excited to be here.
It's fun. I bet you've been a listener and watcher on several of these programs already this year, haven't you?
I definitely have.
All right. Well, I'd like to talk a lot about your background because all of us are generally familiar with your great performance in 2 or 3 different nonprofit 501c3 type civic organizations in our community and all the success you've had. And I know personally, when I see people like you and hear about people like you, I'm always curious, where did you come from? How did you get to where you are? What did you learn along the way? What would you avoid now, kind of thing? But I really want to skip all that and come back to it in a minute. I want to start with the absolute A+ event. I want to hear all about your trip to the White House.
Oh, well.
Who did you meet and whose hand did you get to shake and what did you do?
Yeah, so I'll just share a little bit because we've been partners for Made to Save. Made to Save is a national campaign just to help get people accurate information about the COVID-19 vaccine and to make sure that folks have accurate information and they know where to access the vaccine if they want to do that with their families and for their families. And so we've been a Made to Save partner now for several months, and a lot of our work has been focused primarily in Memphis. And our partners in Memphis have been doing really great work trying to make sure that community is well informed and can make decisions for their family. And so because of that work, we were able to, host the bus tour that came to Memphis and it came to Nashville. We also, the bus tour in Memphis featured the second gentleman, and then the bus tour in Nashville, the first lady came and was here for our bus tour. And because of that work, they, because of the work with the Made to Save campaign, Made to Save, asked if the folks that had been doing a lot of the work wanted to participate in the White House Independence Day celebration because they were celebrating folks that had been doing work around COVID-19. There was a lot of first responders there. There was a lot of nurses there, in addition to a lot of military families. So it was fantastic. It was great to be at the White House. I'd never been before. It was great to be on the South Lawn. Everybody was so excited to be there. And I just wanted to be in the space. It was just great to be there. The first lady and the president gave a speech. We got a chance to hear some great music and watch the fireworks at the end of the night. And I tried to just kind of lay back and experience them and just experience the situation. I didn't try to jump into the lines to, get my picture taken or like try to shake the hand. I just wanted to like really just take it in. I just felt like it was, I never would have thought, growing up, my sister says this all the time, but growing up in a very small town, and you think about where you're going in your life, I just never would have thought there would have been a place where I would have been. And so I just wanted to take it in and enjoy it and experience it all.
So you're smarter than me. You acted cool and sophisticated. I would have been there on the White House lawn trying to jump in the line and get my picture made. And I bet it was a very thrilling experience.
It was really cool. I mean, it was really neat just to have been, and everybody was so, excited and nice and, wanted to make sure folks were, having a good time and got a chance to meet families that had, folks that worked in hospitals and had good conversations with them. It was just it was a really great day.
All right. That sounds great. And you brought back photographs, I assume.
I did have some photographs. I took some pictures. I tried not to be too green and take all the pictures, but I did take some. Though a really kind woman said, "And you're at the White House. You can take as many pictures you want." So
I bet they're used to it. Did you post the photographs anywhere on the internet that all of us can?
I put some on. I put some in my Insta story. I'm not a huge social media person where I feel like I got narrated my entire life. But I did post a few on Instagram and my Insta story while I was there. But that was pretty much it.
That's great. Well, you deserve that recognition. You've been so hardworking, so successful in your efforts that we want to hear about. And I bet Jim Schulman, Vice Mayor Jim Schulman, I'll stop trying to imitate him. I see that he's online with us. I bet he's got some questions and comments he'd like to discuss with you. And
Well,
questions if he runs out.
Larry, thank you for stepping in. There was some technical difficulties, and I had to deal with a sick grandchild this morning, so I was a little late getting on. Mattia, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited about being here. I really appreciate you guys for inviting me.
Well, it's all because I wanted to hear about that White House thing, and then I missed it all because they've been talking about it.
That's all right. Well, I'll catch you up later.
You didn't.
I don't pass up any chances, Jim, to talk about the White House, at least starting this year.
I got it. Hey, Mattia, you didn't drop Larry Wood's name when you were walking around the White House.
I did not.
All right.
It would have worked with Dr. Jill Biden. I'm a college teacher like her at times.
You know, I was up there years ago and used Larry's name, and they called security. So I don't know what that was about. But
yeah, you and your friend Trump, right?
No. But let's move on. So Mattia, I don't know if Larry asked you the question I ask all my guests at the beginning of this thing, and that is, tell us about yourself. So we're so glad you're here. I don't even know what I've been running around this morning. What is your official title now? What is your actual title?
So I'm the executive director for Civic Tennessee, and Civic Tennessee is a nonprofit organization that works with, we're building a coalition of nonprofit groups that really care about making sure that underrepresented communities. So what we define as, Black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters, voters of color, to make sure those folks are really engaged in the process and have a mechanism, not just to vote, to really have power in their communities. And so we've been working with organizations across the state. We are a coalition of organizations working together, and Civic Tennessee is kind of the backbone and support in trying to bring people together. There are a lot of folks, there are a lot of nonprofits that do civic engagement work, and everybody kind of has, a different agenda and a different focus around what their main focus is. But we really all can come together around a couple of things, knowing that we know that, when more people are part of the electorate, then the electorate and then the decisions that are coming out of our leaders, reflect what the values and decisions that more closely reflects the values and the issues that the community care about. And so we're just trying to make sure everybody has that access and knows how to use their voice, and then knows how to advocate for the things that they care about for their communities. But I got kind of, just me started. I feel like I know a lot of you all because I've been, kind of in this space for a little bit, serving on nonprofit boards, which is where I met a lot of you around politics, like Women's Political Collaborative. I served, as the president for the county Young Dems and the state Young Dems for a while. But I grew up in a really small town in Trenton, Tennessee. It's in West Tennessee, close to Jackson, about 20 minutes north of Jackson. You kind of got to draw a map when you talk about some of the smaller towns in West Tennessee. But and Larry,
how did you get here? So Trenton, I know where Trenton is. So why did they let you out of the city? How did you get to Nashville?
Yeah, I think Larry and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, but it was one of those things where, it's a small town. There's not very many opportunities. So, if you go to college, you kind of think about where you want to go and where you want to be. And not that I made any of those choices. I just knew I was going to college. My sister had went to MTSU, seemed like a good idea. So that's where I ended up going. And then, once I got up here, I felt like this was a place for me to kind of set roots. There wasn't a lot of opportunity back home. So, I started looking for a job, got a job in accounting, and quickly figured out that wasn't where I wanted to be for the rest of my life, and made steps to leave that specific profession and ended up, really in communications and community outreach, working in education for a good long while. Still really passionate about education for sure. But, also really engaged in the political, world here in Nashville. Like I said, really part of some organizations. Was able to be on the founding board for NLC, New Leaders Council, and just really, tried to give my time and energy in that space. And now, have an opportunity to do that, as a full-time position.
So, and Larry may have touched on this a little bit, and I will tell you that Brenda Wynn, our county clerk, is on. So don't be nervous because Brenda's on, she's always on. And Judge Anna Escobar is on. So we appreciate both of them being on. I'm hopefully I didn't miss anybody else. So tell me, so I know what your organization does, but maybe let's start with the in question. What are your ultimate goals in terms of trying to get people engaged in this process? Is it more voter registration? Is it more public awareness? Is it a combination of all that?
Mhm.
What is the group trying to do?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things. I think one of the things I feel like there's a couple of like narratives out there about people and how they participate in the system. I think one of the narratives that I've heard a couple of times and I hear often is that people, like I feel like people think that folks don't want to vote or they're too lazy or they're just not they don't want to participate in the system. But I think in reality, what it is the system is hard, and it's not like a system that was supposed to be easy to use, right? I mean, if we think about history and we talk about where this country started when it comes with like how we pick our leaders in democracy, I think we had this notion of one person, one vote, and the people have a choice in who leads them. But in actuality, the words our actions didn't really match up with our words. There were a lot of people, of course, excluded from the process for a very, very long time. And we've seen, people like, the Black community and women fight for their positions to be able to vote. But it's not just about that, right? It's about also not just the vote that you have, but the power that you have to help change decisions, the power that you have to run for office, the power that you have to have influence to make sure that your community is being served. And the vote is a very first step in that. I think we have to be clear about that, in the sense that your vote is the first step, but it's not the only step, because there are a lot of people that's been voting for years and their life hasn't changed very much. So we have to talk about that voting as being a step, because I think sometimes the disconnect is we talk about voting being the end all be all. People vote and they don't see their circumstances change. So they think, well, the vote really didn't matter or it didn't count. But once you vote, you have to figure out how you can be engaged. And so, our premise is really working with nonprofit and organizations that are focused in the community, because one, nonprofits are in the community 24 hours a day. They're in communities doing work outside of election cycles. They are trusted messengers. People, they're not just asking somebody for something like a candidate. They're also going to be there providing services. They're going to be there to make sure you're informed. And they just have a trusted relationship and a really can build relationships within community. So they also have a really great, could have a really great impact in making sure folks understand how to vote, when to vote, what's important based on their organization's, mission and vision. And so they can stay connected. It's not just about voting one time. It's about, I'm working with my organization to vote. And now I'm also going to have an organization that can help me keep me in the process. They can call me and reach out to me to let me know what's going on with, issues that I care about. They also are going to serve me. They may help provide a service and help me get something that I need for my family. So, it's just a much deeper relationship. And what we're really trying to do is get more organizations have the capacity to reach into these communities to do the work, to help get people engaged, but not just engaged because they want to vote, but also engaged to help change some of the things that the communities care about. Okay. And so that's kind of the goal. It's like really getting nonprofits to do this work, and also increasing the people that turn out, increasing the people that are registered, but also just really increasing overall engagement as well.
All right, so I got like a million questions now in my head, and they're all jumbled up, and now I got to figure out what they are. And they're probably gonna be in reverse order. But so oftentimes when people, everyday regular voters go in to vote, they walk in and a lot of times they don't even know what some of the stuff is on the ballot. Okay, so let's just take a good example. A charter amendment shows up on the ballot, a Metro Charter amendment, or retaining a judge. People are going like, what is this? So my question to you is, because then I'm going to come back to voter registration in a minute, but on an issue like that, what ways are you all trying to do to inform voters before they walk in the voting booth? Mm-hmm. And they know what the whole ballot is. And if they have questions about something in particular, they actually have a chance to try to figure out how they actually feel about a particular issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a lot of partners doing great work, and so we try to maximize that work when we see it. And I know One of our partners is the Equity Alliance. They always put out a voter guide. They've expanded that work. So we've been partners with them on that, trying to help make sure that the guide gets into hands. And so their efforts to try to get folks, educated before the actual, election. So that is true. Like, I think a lot of folks step into the vote, and that's why a lot of people don't vote too, is like they don't understand who's running. And particularly at the local level, where I first of all think, one of our, a lot of our organizations are focused on local elections, because one, that is a really tangible way for you to understand like the power of your vote. You could run into your elected official at the grocery store, or there's the accessibility is so vast. Like, you have a pothole or something going on in your neighborhood, you can easily call somebody or your elected official and talk to them about that. And so really just trying to get people connected to learn how that works. But yeah, there are some efforts to do like voter guides that, we try to uplift as much as possible around all the things that are on the ballot. And there in our organizations, when they're doing calls, they're trying to, talk to people about, we are a C3 nonpartisan organization, and we work in C3 spaces. So a lot of times the calls are about, do you know where the election is? What kind of support do you need? Our website, we have a Proud Voter website. We keep the voter guides on that, and try to keep people informed across the state when their elections are happening. And so, we do a lot of voter education, because that is a big component. And honestly, it's confusing. I mean, I'm not saying this is I'm an informed person. I try to stay on it, but like, it is a lot to know about, when you think about how many times we have to vote for local elections and state elections and then national ones and then runoffs. And like, it is a lot to keep up with. And again, I want to be clear about that. I don't think it's hard, just because I think there's purpose around this process being a little complicated. I think there is this notion that, you have to earn your right to vote, as opposed to it just being the right that you have as a citizen for this nation. And some of these rules and regulations are trying to, make sure people have to jump through hoops to exercise their right to vote. And trying to make sure that, people can predict who the electorate would be. So I think, a lot of these things some of them I think are, trying to make sure that there's fairness in the process, but a lot of this is just things that hoops that people need to jump through. And so the process is hard. So there has to be a lot of education around it, and it's not a lot of places to get it, particularly for local elections. They don't get the coverage that you get in a national election. So you have to really do a lot of,
right.
to get people educated.
All right, so I'm going to get to your points in just a second. I'm still trying to go back to the education piece, but I'm really interested in what you think about kind of what's happening around the country in terms of, and we'll talk about the right to vote in just a second, but so if people were right now, if we had an election going on, Equity Alliance put up a voter guide, whatever. So if people came in and said, where do I turn to get an understanding of what's on the ballot and kind of what the issues are? Probably the next question they're going to say is, does it represent both sides? How do you do that? Are you, you can talk about the League of Women Voters, you can talk about different things, but how do you make sure that, particularly either with candidates or with issues, that people get the chance to get a fair interpretation of what is really before them, which is so difficult these days? But how do you try to make sure that people can say, oh, okay, I see both sides, and I'm good with that side?
Well, what we're doing is, like I said, education. It's really about presenting people with what's going to be on the ballot, what issues are going to be on the ballot, and trying to give them some understanding around what's going to, who the candidates are. So it's not
right.
we're not out here advocating for a candidate or another on the C3 space. We're basically anybody that's on the ballot for these elections are generally in the Equity Alliance's voter guide. So they're not, just like a lot of organizations do it. The League does a voter guide, which, we uplift too. And it's really, they send they all do them differently. Some folks send out questionnaires, whatever. But everybody that's running get an opportunity to be part of the guides. It is not, a partisan thing by any means. It's here are the folks going to be on the ballot. You need to be aware of who's going to be on the ballot. There are also tools out there about that we haven't invested in quite yet, because we're still trying to, build as an organization, but there are tools that we've looked into that that do that as well, that are tech tools that allow you to kind of put together, it'll tell you everything that's on the ballot in your particular local area, and you can go through and see. So there are tools out there for that as well that we've looked into, and we might invest in it. But right now we have organizations doing voter guides, and so we haven't really made that investment. But it really is just sharing what's actually on the ballot. It's not about trying to convince people one way or the other. It's just really trying to give them inform them of what their choices are. Here's what's going to be on the ballot. Here's how you actually access how you vote, when you vote, all those things. It's really around getting people access and making sure they understand what's going to be on the ballot, and then giving them making sure they have access to get there and to cast their vote.
Yeah, when you think about it, it can be a pretty intimidating process just to get to the polls. Sure. And then you look at the size sometimes of our ballots, and then you also, during the presidential elections, you're voting for electors, and you're going like, who are these people? And you're going like, what is this?
Yeah.
It's almost as if everybody needs to take a civics class again. Yeah. And maybe you could do that, and then you could teach it all across the state and then across the country. About how, first of all, the importance of the right to vote, and then how do you vote? And then how do you check before you go in to see what's on the ballot? Okay, having said that, we have talked for years about the importance of people of this country and the people that fought and died for this country so that we could have our freedoms. And one of them, and one of our rights, is the right to vote, which is such an important thing. Yet we don't have sometimes high numbers of people that vote. I believe that we should make it easier for every citizen to vote, because that's what this country was built upon. So tell me, from what you see as the executive director of your program, how do we get to the ability to make it easier for people to get the right to vote?
Yeah, I mean, our elections are ran by our state, and they make a lot of decisions about the rules for voting. I know there's everybody probably have heard about the National Bill, the For the People Act, that is been debated and trying to be passed. But I mean, frankly, we are at the bottom of voter registration and voter turnout in Tennessee. Everybody's probably heard this a bazillion times, but it's always worth repeating. But if you look at where we were in 1996, so in 1996, Tennessee was ranked 10th when it comes to ease of voting. By 2016, we were ranked 48th, and so that is within a 10-year span, and that was in 96. We didn't have voter ID laws like we do now. We were actually in the pioneering some of the early voting and all of that, early voting and satellite voting locations. We were actually moving towards progress, and when it came to expanding access to the ballot box. And then, of course, like a lot of people across the country, we did not move forward. We started moving backwards. But then there were other states that also did move forward. So that dropped Tennessee back. So people instituted same-day registration. Some states expanded absentee voting. So there are some states that are full mail-in states where they mail you a ballot. You don't even have to ask for it. They mail you a ballot and you mail your ballot back. But there are also states that don't have an excuse, so anybody can request an absentee ballot. There's also automatic voter registration, which we have a somewhat of a version of that, but it's not quite. It does not quite, automatic. So, if you go to get your driver's license, you can register to vote. But in some states, it's automatic registration when you get your voter. You don't have to say, you don't have to opt in or anything. It's an automatic process, or you have to opt out. And so there are things like that states have instituted that really made it much easier for people. And a lot of the calls, so we've worked with our partners, Organizing Equity Alliance and Lawyers Committee on, doing some voter protection work. We partnered with all of them. And so I was able to sit in on some of that. And a lot of the calls that we got in were people just had basic questions. And a lot of folks weren't registered, wanted to know if they could register and vote the same day, which is not something you can do in Tennessee. We have a 4-week, register where you have to register 4 weeks before the actual election. And a lot of states don't have that. And so there's just things like that that would make the access much easier for folks. And the states that have implemented some of those things, they've seen their voter participation increase quite a bit, while we've seen a decrease, and I think we've seen a decline in our ease of voting because other folks have, made it a little easier than we have. We have some of the, when you think about we have some of the most restrictive voting, rules, like with absentee voting, we have an excuse. So there's just, things that we could do to really expand it. I don't know that there has been the will to do that, but there is a lot of things.
Right. Let me ask you a loaded political question. Okay, here it comes. And so I understand, but maybe I don't understand. And I learn new things every week. Some good, some bad. But I have trouble with certain points. Okay. The right to vote is what is one of the great things about this country. It helps makes this country. So I can never figure out politically why people shouldn't be on the same side. That's what this country is built on, is one of the freedoms and the rights is the right to vote. So how come we can't get on the same page and find ways to make people vote? Why can't we pass a national bill to say, look, we want people to vote. That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
What is the problem? I can't seem to understand how Republican, Democrat, Independent, that's what this country is built on.
Well, I think that's the idea this country was built on. But I think in actuality, if you can control who votes, then you can control the outcome of the election, and you can control the policies that are passed. And I think there's been, an effort to try to control who has access to the ballot box and who doesn't. And, that's just, we can see that. We see particular laws that target specific communities. You see states, and not in Tennessee because we don't vote on Sundays, but states that had Sunday voting, that because that was one of the big times that African American church did souls to the polls. We saw states like roll that back because there were certain people voting on certain days. Like, I think this idea that we have a voter ID law, and you can use your gun permit to as an ID, but you can't use your college ID, clearly shows that we're trying to make sure that some people have an ease of voting and some people don't. And so like, these are just things that this is what it is, because there are folks that want to be in power, and people want to be able to get reelected, and they want to be able to control what's happening in their neighborhoods, and they want to be able to, understand who's going to be in power, and they want to be able to like get their folks in power. And when you are when you have these laws, you can control who has access to the ballot box and who doesn't, or you can try to control that. You don't control it 100% clearly, but you can try to, make sure the folks, that the ease of vote for some people is hard. And so, the same thing when you see folks closing polling locations and all of that, like, there's just this, I think the idea that we want people to vote is one thing, but I think in practice, folks, when you're running for office, you're trying to minimize the amount of outreach you've got to do. You're trying to minimize, you want to know who your people are that, you need to bring out. You want to know all of those things. And, this is just the cycle that we're in.
All right. So
we should all be on the same page about this. I
understand. I can't understand why we're not on the same page. So, so I was taught or brought up with the belief that you're supposed to maximize your outreach. So running is difficult. I know that. And obviously you want to outreach to the people who do vote. But I want, I want to reach as many people as possible. I want people to be informed, and I want them to go vote.
Yeah.
So the notion of trying to limit the number of people because you're trying to control the outcome of the election, seems anti-democratic to me. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah, it's just that's not what a democracy is. Democracy
Yeah. And
is,
I think one of the, and I'm not gonna, like, campaigns are hard. It's hard to run a campaign. It's hard to reach out to everything. I think that's one of the things that why it's important that nonprofits do this outreach work. I mean, most of our focus is on, we do have the underrepresented communities, but we also do a focus on low propensity voters or voters that don't turn out in every election. So, you're right. Like a lot of campaigns, if they're campaigning, they're going to try to, because of limited resources, you kind of got to hit the people that you think are going to come out. So there is also a reason why a lot of folks don't know there's an election going on. And so the work that we're doing is trying to actually, get to some of those people that no one may ever call, right? There are folks that we have talked to when we called, for 2020, and we've worked at some municipal work, and folks were like, this is the first call I've gotten. Probably because, they may not be avid voters or somebody that votes all the time. And so they may not be on anybody's campaign outreach list because, they're just not, they're trying to stick to folks that are going to be likely voters. And so we're trying to reach folks that, may not necessarily be folks that get a chance to, or that have participated in the process as much as others. And also folks that are underrepresented. So that's one of the focus that we have is, to make sure those folks that may not necessarily be outreach, you may even know elections going on has a touch point.
so I also know that sometimes years ago there was an election, I think it was for the Senate seat in Massachusetts, and people were calling into the state, including me, about candidates, and people would hang up on me, or they would say, this is the 7th person that has called me today. You call me again, and I'm not voting for anybody. So sometimes we can overdo it. I get that too.
Yeah, I think in Tennessee, I think in some of the states that have a ton of outreach that are swing states, they probably get a ton of calls. I don't think we are in that space here in Tennessee. But I hope that one day we are into a space where folks are getting so inundated with folks about, the elections that, they're annoyed. I think if we get to that place, I think we're going to be in a good place. But I don't necessarily.
Wouldn't it be nice to be at least a swing state where people do participate and we do have conversations, and it is something that states that, on a national election, we are part of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great for us just to be, to have, to really be able to say, have this culture of civic engagement in Tennessee. And I don't think we have that right now because of the difficulty it takes to really get engaged. So, and the resources that we have in the state for folks to do this type of civic engagement work, that's one of the other things that we're trying to do with Civic, is to make sure organizations can do civic engagement work and try to find resources to help them do it. But a lot of folks, are funding, service providers and not necessarily this type of work here in Tennessee. So, but I hope that we get to a place where, not swing state or not, that like we just have, we have this level of engagement and activity that people are expected. They know they're going to get a lot of phone calls because it's an election coming up. We become the state that, where folks are really engaged, and that's not where we are yet.
Well, it's I think elections can be exciting, particularly national elections. I hate the fact that Tennessee is usually called 1 minute after the polls close, or maybe even less than that. Usually it's like 5 seconds. At 7 o'clock, we close the polls and the state's already called. And it's sort of like, well, there's no fun in that. There's no excitement. There's no, discourse. There's nothing. And I'm sad about that. Let me ask you this. So in terms of voter outreach, obviously there are some people who English is not their native language. They may have trouble. They're citizens. They certainly have the right to vote. What's the outreach? Do you all do outreach in other languages to make sure that citizens have a better understanding of the process? Because it may be new to some people, and they get the right to vote. They've earned the right. They should be voting, but we can also be intimidated. So what's the outreach in terms of other languages?
Yeah, and so let me just be a little bit clear about what Civic does. We really are, so we're, like I said, a coalition of groups. So Civic is kind of like, if you've been in the collective impact world, have heard about that at all, we're kind of serving somewhat of a backbone organization. So we have tons of partners that we work with. And many of our partners like Turk, and even some of our partners in Memphis, like Memphis for All, they do outreach in all communities. And so what we try to do is help, if there's opportunities for us to help, like get them the data they need, get them the support they need, that's where we are. But definitely we have groups that are doing that type of outreach for sure. And making sure that everybody have access to, you know, to the ballot box and understand what's going on there. We have,
You're kind of like, you're like the hub, and
Yeah.
you're trying to make sure that the information gets out to your different partners to do outreach,
Right.
which is a smart idea. Okay.
And trying to bring other people to the fold. Like some of the ones I've mentioned, they've been doing this work before Civic was around. I mean, we're just trying to get people to do it collectively because we think that we're better together. This is a complex issue to solve, right? We've talked about a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of barriers. There's an information gap. So it's not something that one organization can solve. You know, we're really all going to have to work collectively to be able to solve it. And so we're looking for organizations that, you know, really care about making sure folks have, you know, have access to the ballot box, making sure folks, even if you have an issue that you care about, how do you get more folks to really engage in the process so that they can help you advocate for those issues? Particularly, that's what we're trying to do, is get more people. And we have about 24 nonprofit partners right now. But of course, we know that we could have way more. But that's where we start.
Okay. So tell me, give me some specific examples with you all as the core, but these outside groups, what has shown to be really effective in terms of, I guess, voter registration and voter education? Can you give me some specific examples of a group that you work with where there actually is something that seems to be getting people more engaged?
So there's a couple of things that we know work for sure. There's a lot of folks that have been, you know, trying to figure out what works. And there's some things that work for sure. And the one thing that works more than anything is canvassing, door-to-door conversations, having conversations with people. And last year clearly was a struggle because of the pandemic. And even now we're still living in this pandemic. So it was really hard for us to do that face-to-face, door-to-door conversation. So we did try to struggle to figure out what was going on. How do we do outreach in a time when we can't be face-to-face? But that has been a clear, one of the best ways to engage with folks and to have conversations and to get people engaged is to go to their door and have a conversation with them. There's another thing that folks have been doing now. We've done some of, and everybody does it already. It's just a formal way to do it and talk about it, but it's called relational organizing. And that's basically you talking to your network and getting your network engaged. Just like we talk about nonprofits being trusted, also, you know, you have a power that as an individual to call your cousins or neighbors or friends or church members and talk to them about it. Voting and talking to and answer questions that they may have. So equipping people to have those conversations within their own networks. But all of it stems from relationships, conversations. Like that is the key. And that's why we think nonprofits have this unique ability to be able to do this work, is because that's what they're good at. And that's what actually works, is really having conversations with people. But you have to be able to do that, not just during an election year. So part of our strategy for Civic and all of our partners is getting our organizations to a place where they can have these conversations year to year, every year, not even in an election year. There's a way for folks to go out and have conversations in their community and have the capacity to do that. Because right now, a lot of the civic engagement funding and work happens around an election season. What we're trying to do is trying to build enough resources so that organizations can have these conversations every year. So we're not having to talk to somebody one year, wait another year or 2 years before there's another conversation. There's continuous conversation. They're continuously connected to what's going on. And they're continuously connected to an organization that's going to get them and plugged in when it's time to be plugged in.
Okay, so I love the idea of door to door. I'm used to that. Conversations, all that stuff. It sounds good, and it is good, but obviously we live in a very divided country right now, where it's hard to have a conversation with somebody on the other side because they have that thing embedded in their head where they're not going to listen to you. They've already made their decision. You're wrong. They're right. What about dealing with that? And maybe add to that, the idea that during campaigns, I tend to turn the television off because the nastiness of these ads, obviously it works, you know, because people wouldn't be doing it if it didn't. But how do you re-engage people so we can have conversations on these issues and get some of the nastiness stuff out of these campaigns?
Well, I mean, I feel like that's a campaign question. I feel like that's the canvas to actually answer that. When we're going to doors, we're talking to people about actually voting and like the process, make sure they have what they need, letting them know there's an election going on. So we're not coming to folks from a partisan lens. So they're, you know, from a partisan lens or a candid lens. So folks are a little more open to having some conversations about it. I will tell you, you know, I think, again, folks are really, if you get somebody at the door, they'll be honest with you and they'll have a conversation with you about it, you know, and, you know, our goal is not to convince them to do one thing or the other. It's just to convince them to actually go out and vote and to have a voice in that particular election. But I think, you know, I think you have a point around, you know, us having, it's difficult to have conversations these days. It's been difficult even, you know, when just the perception of really trying to engage new voters is a perception that like you're trying to do something sinister when it really is just trying to expand access to folks and make sure folks have, you know, voice and choice in who leads their community. So, I mean, I don't have the answer for, you know, what's happening.
Yeah, that's why you were on this call. You're supposed to have the answers to all my
I
problems.
know. I just feel like I feel like this is a situation. I hope that we can get to a better place, but I still think the conversations are the best way to do it. It's hard for people to be, you know, there's commonality in everybody's, you know, everybody's existence, right? We can find a common ground. And, you know, when we talk to canvassers and we talk about training and we train people when they're going to the doors, you know, a lot of that is trying to find that commonality. You know, it's not just coming to somebody and going to the door and like, here's this, you know, you introduce yourself. You try to find a common point of view. We both believe that, you know, our communities are important, right? Right. Then you have a conversation with them about, you know, why you want them, what's important for them and why they should go out to vote, or you're telling them what it is. But you have to find that commonality. It really does open up people to at least have a conversation with you about stuff. But right. I agree that we're in a really peculiar place where it's not even just about people digging their heels in. To me, that makes it difficult. To me, it's more about, you know, we can't determine what's actually facts. You know, it's like, you know, you try to tell somebody a fact that you know is a fact and they don't believe it. Like, that's like what's true and what's not true. To me, it's less about the folks kind of going in their corners. It's more about like, we can't seem to find commonality around what the truth is. And that is scary.
Well, so I guess the original question kind of stemmed from, I would think that we would in this country have a commonality, or, you know, a shared value that voting is what's wonderful about this country. So sort of the question was, even that, you said that people think you have a sinister motive because you're trying to get people to go out and vote. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what this country is about. It's a democracy. People go vote. That's how we decide things in this country.
I agree, but I think we've always tried to. I think we've been fighting for that view of democracy, right? Right. You know, even when the Constitution was written, you know, half of people weren't free. Only people that could vote were, you know, land-owning white men. You know, so this is just facts about our nation. So, you know, we've talked about democracy, you know, for a long time. We've got to acknowledge the fact that, you know, the vision for democracy and the practice for democracy has never been, you know, on the same page. We've been trying to fight for that vision over the years, and we're getting closer and closer to that vision. I think, but, you know, it's fits and starts. Like, you know, we expand the right, then we take it back, then we expand it a little bit more, then, you know, we're moving backwards. And so it's just this constant pull to get to this democracy that we all see for our nation. And so we just got to keep fighting for that expanded, vision that we all know we want for this nation. And part of that is getting people more engaged in this process, because the more people we have engaged, the more we have, the more voice and choice we have in who serves us.
I'm so glad you're doing this. This is very, very important. And so I'm very appreciative of your work and everybody else's work connected to it. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And I know when I finally was able to get on this morning, I know Larry was talking to you about your visit to the White House, but your visit to the White House was tied to the vaccination process, correct?
Yes.
So, and you may have gotten into this, but since I missed it, I'll ask you again. What were you doing? What did you do during, as the pandemic was going, since we're still in the pandemic? What caused you to get invited to the White House? What were you doing in terms of helping this whole process?
Yeah, we're part of a national Made to Save partner. Made to Save is an initiative to get information about the vaccines and access to vaccines to families. And we've been a partner of theirs for several months. And a lot of our organizations saw an opportunity. The work that we're doing, like the organizing work that happens through a lot of our organizations, happens around all types of issues. And they're used to going out and talking to people, and they're used to having phone calls and really giving people information so they can make decisions. So it seemed like a natural fit that we would be able to use this, the mechanisms to be able to make sure families had the right information about the vaccine and that they can make choices that were important for their families. So we became a partner, and we've been doing a lot of that work, particularly in Memphis, to make sure folks have the access and they have information they need. And that's how I got invited to the White House. We were Made to Save partner. They did the bus tour that came here, and we helped organize that in Memphis and here in Nashville. And so that's really what led to the White House trip, which was really great. But like I said, these organizations are organizing around a lot of things outside of just elections, and that's the key, right? It's the consistent communication, the consistent engagement that really helps build those relationships to get folks plugged into all types of issues.
Is the organization still doing this outreach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Still doing. We might be able to expand it to places, and so but we're still doing some of that outreach for sure.
Okay, and then let me ask you and I know you're not a health expert.
No.
But the question would be, watching the news, reading the papers, getting information, numbers are going up again. Are you getting any more inside information, internal information about what it may look like for the next several months? I don't have a good feeling about this.
I do not either, but I do not have any information about it. It is nerve-wracking, I think. And a lot of the folks that have been in the conversations, there are some folks that have been that folks are willing to have conversations about it. I think that's been one of the things that has been clear through the work, is that people want to talk about it. They want to share why they haven't or why they have decided to do it. They want accurate information so they can make those decisions. And so, the work has actually been, pretty fulfilling, because people really want to talk about it. And, we're not trying to convince anybody to do one thing or the other. We're just trying to make sure they have the facts. And so, it is really nerve-wracking that we are seeing a tide, and that I'm not sure what the next few months are going to hold either. I think we want to definitely make sure everybody in the community stays safe. This is really about making sure folks are making decisions and staying safe and being able to access it. And I think, folks seem to think, oh, these vaccines are everywhere, everybody should know how to access it. But we still have a lot of folks that really just haven't been able to figure out, take the time to do the research it takes to be able to figure out where to get it and how to get it. There are a lot of folks that still don't know that it's free, so the information, a lot of it's just been giving out general information that you think people had, but everybody didn't have. So, I wish I could have a magic wand to know where things were going, but I don't. I am really nervous about it, just like you, though.
Well, I'll tell you, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, kind of a short-term solution to a particular problem and it involved a discussion about the pandemic. And when you think about it, which is very scary, is this thing is obviously there's no, I mean, with the number of people that are not vaccinated, this thing is still out there and loose. And until we get more people vaccinated, it's going to be with us for a while. And, you know, you start hearing about people starting to pull back off release restrictions. They're starting to think about restrictions again. That's not what we wanted. And so people need to understand that we're in a very important phase of this thing. And I'm worried. I'm worried at this point. Let me see if I got all my questions in.
Well, I will tell you, I will say one thing that's happening this year that's also super important that I think is redistricting. I just want to lift that up because that's another thing that we've been working on. So we've been working with this year because there's not many. We had some municipal elections this year, but a lot of the, you know, a lot of areas didn't have an election. So you know, some of our priorities outside of the COVID outreach, which we didn't anticipate to do, but ended up happened because of some of the support needed. But also we've been planning around redistricting now for a while. We hosted a redistricting academy. We hosted 3 last year with Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and we hosted 1 this year to train folks on, you know, to become redistricting advocates, to know the process, to understand what it is. And so as much as we talk about like people going out to vote and expanding access, you know, really the redistricting process is where power is actually built. Like it determines, you know, what your districts look like, how they're made up, making sure that communities that have interests together are zoned or in the same district so they can have a better impact on those things that they care about. And so I don't know, we don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but I just want folks to be, you know, aware that this is happening this year. This is for the next 10 years. This is going to happen. That's why the census is important for a bazillion reasons. But one of those reasons is because it determines how power is distributed, and not just across the country, in our state, but in our local communities. And that process is happening in the next few years, and in the next year. So I just feel like, please be on the lookout. Join Civic Tennessee. We'll have opportunities for you to learn more about the process and how to get engaged.
Okay, so we got 3 minutes left. So I'm giving Larry Woods advance notice. He gets to ask the last question, but here's my last question. Okay, so I saw you last week at the John Lewis Memorial. I think it was a kind of a celebration of his life. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. And I was just going to ask you what you thought. I thought it was Reverend Lawson.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I feel like it's one of those things. This work is really hard. And, you know, it's hard to be in it all the time. You just feel like there's not that many wins, you know, just to be honest. This is a long-term strategy we're talking about. We don't expect to see a shift, you know, we don't expect to see everybody voting, you know, next year, right? And so it's a long haul. Sometimes it's a sludge. And so, you know, I felt like that really motivated and reinvigorated me personally, because everything that has every accomplishment and all the progress we've ever made as a nation has been hard and tough. And so, you know, just to hear the experiences and to hear the voices of folks that, you know, have went through, you know, times that I can't even imagine, was just really, really inspiring. So I left it, you know, motivated and ready and refueled to continue the work.
I may need to watch it again. It really was.
Rather than ask a question, Mattia, let me echo what Jim's been saying, what I think probably everyone on this broadcast knows. I really appreciate the work and effort you've made, you and your colleagues and all the partners listed on your website. You're doing the right things. I know it doesn't always work out. You know, just like I do, it never will. But Reverend Lawson, James Lawson, who really organized the Nashville sit-ins and trained the college students at Fisk and American Baptist TSU. I've talked to him about this half a dozen times over the years, and every time he smiles quietly at me and says, Larry, politics is never going to get you where you want to be in terms of human and racial relationships. And I think your work and what's happening with a younger generation today is eventually going to prove Reverend Lawson wrong. I think the kind of political work you do, the kind of political stands people like Jim Schulman and some of our other elected officials that are on this broadcast have made, have really made a difference in people's lives. Keep it up. You're doing great.
I appreciate the encouragement. I definitely think we're trying our best to give folks, it's not necessarily about us. It's really about people really understanding how they can participate. And, I think a lot of the folks that we talk to, they just want what's best for their family. They're not against or for anything except what's best for their family. And, just so long that it's been all too hard for folks to really be able to advocate for that and to know how to do it and to be engaged. And, I wouldn't be anywhere without the partners that I work with, the organizations that are that's been on the ground. Like I said, many before Civic even came around. Everybody has been really, really doing great work. And it's been my honor and privilege to be able to work with all of these organizations and to work collaboratively with them, because we uplift one another, we support one another, and we need that level of support to keep going in this space.
Mattia Powell, thank you for being my guest. What's the best way, if people want to find out about your organization, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is CivicTennessee.org, so CivicTN.org. So you can go there to find out how to get connected. We have an events page that I'm going to update immediately following this, because we'll have a couple of redistricting events coming up. If you are looking for specific redistricting events, the league is having one coming up. By the way, I'll send it to you, Jim, to put in the email that you go out. But it's about communities of interest. It's going to be great. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to learn about redistricting. And if anybody's interested in making phone calls around COVID outreach, we have ways for you to do that as well. And so, but the website is a blessed place to go.
Mattia, thank you. Thank you for being my guest. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. And Brenda Wynn, who always has interesting things to say, will be my guest next week.
Well, I'm definitely tuning in for Brenda, because
absolutely,
she's the best, and I can't wait to support her.
So we'll all be turning in. Larry, thank you for stepping in for me.
Anytime.
I may get you to do it next week, because I just want to sit back and listen to Brenda. So anyway, everybody be safe. We'll see everybody next week. Okay. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.